美国第71任财政部长劳伦斯·萨默斯呢，近年来时常的登上媒体的版面。这一位以直言不讳而闻名的经济学家，尽管已经是年过花甲，但是仍然活跃在全球的经济和金融研究的前线。对于当下很多热点的话题，都发表过一些犀利的观点。萨默斯呢，是1954年出生于美国的一个犹太人的家庭，那父母呢是宾州大学知名的经济学家，而他的叔叔萨缪尔森和舅舅阿罗都是诺贝尔经济学奖的得主。受到了家庭环境的影响，年仅16岁的萨默斯就进入了麻省理工大学读大学，之后呢又进入了哈佛大学攻读博士学位。在他28岁的时候，就成为了哈佛大学历史上最年轻的终身教授。1982年起呢，萨默斯就职于里根政府的白宫经济顾问委员会。此后，他的每一段职业生涯都令人刮目相看。1991年呢，他担任世界银行的首席经济学家。1993年进入美国财政部，从主管国际事务的财长助理一直到副部长，直到1999年呢接替了罗伯特·鲁宾出任财长。2001年到2006年期间，他担任哈佛大学校长。2009年到2010年期间呢，他掌管美国国家经济委员会，成为了奥巴马经济政策的总设计师。不久前呢，萨默斯来到北京出席中国发展高层论坛，在论坛前夕就接受了我们财经时间的专访。那么他罕见地回顾起自己早年的一些成长经历，也分享了他对于每段职业生涯的感悟。这一位横跨政界、学界和商界，在经济研究领域颇具分量的长者，将给自己的人生打出多少分的成绩呢？
Looking back at your life and career, what are one or two biggest challenges you encountered and perhaps made your later success or you today?
You know, I've been very fortunate. I had wonderful, brilliant, loving parents who were able to teach me and guide me in the fields that I was interested in, and that's the biggest gift that anybody can have. And if you think about real obstacles, people who don't have a chance to grow up in that kind of way have the real obstacles. It's always seemed to me. So I don't have anything that I can feel justified in complaining about or saying that it was a huge achievement to overcome. What I can say is that I have always tried to focus on doing a good job in whatever it is that I'm doing. And if I do, I feel like ultimately it will be noticed, ultimately it will be rewarded. And I see many young people who are all about the plan and the career objective, and they're not about the mission of the career. And I think if you keep your eye on the people you're trying to help, whether it's students, if you're a teacher, whether it's disease victims, if you're a medical researcher, whether it's clients, if you're a banker or a lawyer, if you keep your eye on the needs of the people you're supposed to be trying to help, I think that's often the best way to be most productive. That has always been the approach that I have tried to take, and I think it's worked reasonably well for me.
Mm-hmm. Growing under the kind of shadow of, not the shadow, under Paul Samuelson and Ken Arrow, is that a pressure to you or that actually inspired you?
They were both very, very supportive of me. I think when I was young, I probably didn't realize just how special and great they were as economists. Sure, there were moments of pressure, and there were moments when people would introduce me, and the only thing they'd say about me was who my uncles were, and I didn't ever much like that. But I always took them as inspiration, sources of advice and support, and I don't think they shaped my path through the economics profession, though like many economists, I certainly learned a great deal from their work.
Earlier in your life, you were unfortunately diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. I noticed over the years you wrote a lot about health issues. how does that earlier life experience influence you?
It's not something you forget. And it's something that leaves you with a desire to make the most of every day. And if I seem impatient sometimes, that might be part of the reason why. I also learned from that experience that the treatment that worked in my case had only been developed 10 years before. And so if it had been 15 years before, there wouldn't have been a treatment for me. And what I learned from that was the immense power and importance of biomedical research. And so I've worked very hard to support that, both on global health issues like malaria and AIDS, and in the context of issues like cancer in the United States. I also saw during my time when I was sick how much of a difference that doctors made. And I remember I always said, because it made a real impression on me, I always said to medical students when I met them that it was their awesome responsibility, that what was for them just another 10 minutes in the day was likely to be 10 of the most important and momentous moments in someone's life when they received a diagnosis. And that made it a special challenge to be a doctor. And I'm especially proud of my daughter, who's right now training to be a doctor, and my brother, who has for many years been a physician.
美国的前国务卿基辛格呢，曾经给予这个萨默斯非常高度的评价。他认为白宫应该给萨默斯设立一个永久的职位。实际上呢，自从上个世纪90年代起，在整整20年的时间里，美国无论是这个经济政策、国际经济协作，乃至全球经济框架的形成，都有萨默斯参与非常浓重的一笔。那么他曾经参与的像是这个应对亚洲金融危机、俄罗斯的金融风暴等多个重大的国际金融事件。也负责金融危机后美国经济的复苏政策，主导推动了2008年金融危机后7870亿美元的经济刺激计划。他也主张金融市场去管制化，推行金融监管改革法案，要相信市场的力量。
During the Clinton administration time, many think you presided over the financial deregulation. What I'm interested in is your thoughts on this round of financial deregulation under this current administration, perhaps at two levels. First, given political constraints, is it inevitable that this pendulum will swing either to too loose or too tight? And secondly, given what we've seen so far with this administration, where do you think it will likely lead us?
I don't like formulating the question in terms of one-dimensional, more regulation good or more regulation bad. I think that's a gross oversimplification. There's some regulation that is good for the economy and is probably also good for financial stability, and there's other regulation that can be bad for banks but still can be bad for the economy and for financial stability as well. Yes, we did repeal Glass-Steagall, but I actually think that made the system safer because it made it possible for the mergers that saved the system to take place. It made it possible for the central bank to lend money to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs at a crucial moment. So I don't think that was a mistake. With respect to the current deregulation, I think that it goes to what are, I think, some of the best and most important parts of the increased regulation we've had. I worry a great deal about scaling back capital requirements. I really worry a great deal about scaling back liquidity requirements, requirements that banks hold substantial amounts of cash. It seems to me that panic phenomenon where people decided they wanted to rush to the bank to get their money out so they weren't last in line, so they were sure they could get their money, had a great deal to do with why we had such a difficult time in 2008, And I think requiring banks to hold more capital and to hold more liquidity is probably the best way of preventing those kinds of spirals.
That's right. One question relating to regulation is crypto assets regulation. I'm just wondering, how do you see the current state of affairs of cryptocurrencies?
I think the blockchain is likely to be of enduring importance, in the same way that alternating current was of importance in making the economy much more productive. I think the blockchain over time will help to take frictions out, and that will facilitate a great deal of exchange, and I think that will be positive. But I think the blockchain is good enough that it can stand on its own 2 feet on the merits. And I think there has been a certain amount of advocacy of Bitcoin on the principle that it can avoid money laundering rules, that it can facilitate tax evasion, that it will somehow succeed at a moment when the dollar enters into hyperinflation. And I don't think any of those are terribly plausible rationales for Bitcoin having a major role in the system.
在美国政府任职的这10几年的时间里呢，萨默斯不仅仅表现出了极强的危机处理能力，那么在金融危机中挽救美国经济，并且扭衰为增，而且呢还在国际经济合作与国际金融机构的这个议事当中，特别是这个中美经济关系的管理中做出了很多的贡献。主张全球化的他呢，曾经对中国加入世贸组织表示支持。而就近期备受关注的中美贸易关系趋于紧张的话题呢，萨默斯也是多次发声。那么在出席中国发展高层论坛期间呢，他就表示，两国如果是要打贸易战以牙还牙，这是不可能实现共赢的。那么他呼吁呢，中美之间要互相的尊重，在两国共同的关注点上要进行合作。
Another hotly discussed topic nowadays is the U.S.-China or trade issues. How do you see the prospect? Will there be a trade war or?
I sure hope there won't be a trade war. As Ronald Reagan used to say of nuclear wars can never be won and therefore must never be fought. And I think something very similar is true with respect to trade wars. I think a trade war would be very costly for the United States and very costly for China as well. So I'm pretty worried about trade wars. I think the world will stay out of a big-time trade war, but I'm a lot less sure than I was a year ago.
So is it the U.S. action on China, is it really going to help the U.S. economic prospect? Given
I think Americans who think it will help the U.S. economic prospect are wrong. All you have to think about is that we have 40 times as many people who are working in industries that use steel as we have workers in producing steel. So I suspect this will destroy more jobs than it creates. I think the argument that the president has made that this will somehow support national security is crazy when only 3% of our steel is used for national security and we produce 70% of our steel domestically. And so I think these steel tariffs are a very poor public policy idea. I suspect over time people will figure that out.
Liu He, introduced to Western audience as China's Larry Summers. I'm just wondering, in your contact with these Chinese officials, how do you see the prospect of China's economic governance with technocrats like Liu He in charge of important positions now?
Liu He and I have been friends for many years. I was very pleased to write an introduction to his paper on financial crises, which we published under the auspices of Harvard several years ago. He is a man who I admire very, very much, and I think he will have good ideas for what China can do to strengthen its financial system in the process of economic reform. But ultimately, economics is embedded in politics, even as it helps to shape political conditions. And so what will be feasible to get done in terms of economic reform in China will depend upon the will of the Chinese people. It will depend upon the strength of the Chinese ultimate leadership, and that's a very hard thing to judge. But Liu He seems to me to be someone who will be very good at developing an economic agenda and at persevering on that economic agenda. I think that the technical sophistication of China's financial authorities continues to increase. There's more expertise with financial systems around the world. There's more of an analytical approach, and I think that bodes very well. But ultimately, politics will make the major decisions, and I don't think there's a path forward that doesn't involve some pain along the way as budget constraints are hardened, as regulations are increased. And so the authorities will need to have not just wisdom, but also character if they're going to carry through.
那么对于公众来说呢，萨默斯另一件引人注目的头衔就是哈佛大学的第28任校长。在2001年的时候呢，时年47岁的他从众多的候选人当中脱颖而出，被予以重任。上任之初呢，他就推行了大刀阔斧的改革，大力的发展自然科学教育，希望呢能够带领哈佛大学恢复昔日的荣耀。但在另一方面呢，萨默斯强硬的行事作风和直言不讳的性格，也让他吃了不少的苦果。2005年的时候呢，因为发表了认为女性在科学研究领域不占优势的言论，萨默斯受到了舆论的猛烈抨击。而这呢，也成为了他后来丢掉哈佛大学校长职务的导火索。萨默斯自己呢也坦言，比起做这个美国财长，做哈佛的校长要更难。
Throughout your career, but perhaps manifested in your Harvard days, your instinct was to put truth above feelings. Many know you well, really stood by you, but you are not understood by some others.
I hope I'm not a person who's oblivious to the feelings of others. I certainly try not to be. But I am a person who believes that the way you best show respect for people is to tell them the truth as you believe it. And I'm someone who believes that the purpose of argument and discussion is not just to understand each other's position or to respect each other's position, but to figure out a better answer to the question. Whether the question is what securities to buy, or whether the question is how to build a bridge, or whether the question is how to treat a child, whatever the question is, I think a process of active discussion, evidence, looking at data, analyzing is likely to be the best way to get to the answer. That may seem like a cliche, but we have a president of the United States now who has a different philosophy and who believes that it's more a matter of one's instinct without doing a lot of analysis. And my experience has been that hard work pays off, and that it pays off with respect to public policy as well.
What mentors and mentoring others meant to you?
I certainly learned a lot working for Bob Rubin, with all the experience he had in markets and with all the experience he had in management and working within organizations. It was a very good experience for me to work with Bob Rubin, as it had been a good experience for me years before to be a graduate student under Martin Feldstein. And I've always tried to give all that back by working with and mentoring students, and I feel lucky about some of the extraordinary people I've had a chance to work with. Perhaps the most famous one is Sheryl Sandberg, who worked for me for 5 years, including during the time I was Treasury Secretary. Another example would be Tim Geithner, who was my special assistant at the beginning of my time at the Treasury in the 1990s when he was a young man. Another example of a young woman I had a chance to work with when she was a Harvard undergraduate was Chrystia Freeland, who's now the Foreign Minister of Canada. And there are a variety of economists like Jim Viterbo, the president of the National Bureau of Economic Research, who I had a chance to work with on their thesis papers when they were young. So it's very important to me. I always think that the best way to have the longest standing influence is to be a teacher, because then your influence is being felt even when you're not there to provide it, because in a sense your vision and your views and whatever you cared about most and been able to persuade people of carries through with one's students.
Can you depart any kind of practical advice for young people in terms how they can find a good mentor, a good partner?
I guess I would say three things to young people. First, in the modern world, strategy is much more about building on strength than it is about compensating for weakness. So if you're young, figure out what you're good at and you like, and concentrate on that, and try to get yourself into a situation where you can do what you like and what you're good at, and where other people will do other things. People who try to make themselves good at everything and to shore up weakness don't end up achieving real excellence in anything. And the most important thing is to achieve real excellence in something. I'll tell you, I have a, maybe it's not fashionable, maybe it's even slightly old-fashioned view about mentorship, which is the way Sheryl Sandberg got to be my mentor, got to have me as a mentor, was she got the best grade in my class. And I'm always prepared to mentor, if they want it, the student who does best in my class of 100 or 150 Harvard students. But if Sheryl hadn't worked hard and gotten the best grade in the class or a very good grade in the class, I probably would have been less likely to hire her and then less likely to mentor her. So in general, I think you make your own opportunities to have mentors by doing an excellent job. And
while being the president of Harvard, you advocate big for more financial aid.
I did.
Yeah. After, say, 10 plus years, how do you look at the inequality of wealth and also inequality of opportunity situation at the moment?
I'm proud to have done what I could in the job that I had. And as a consequence of what Harvard did, a number of other schools essentially copied the program. And this was an idea where being copied was the highest form of flattery. And so I was glad to see that emulation. And I think it represented a valuable but a small step towards more equality of opportunity in America. And there are a lot of things we're going to have to look at, expanding some of our elite institutions, making sure that kids don't get off an academic track before they're 12 years old and lose the chance to go to a very strong college. I think we've got a lot of way to go on equal opportunity in the United States.